The chapel was cold, though September in Austin usually pressed its warmth into your skin even through walls of stone. St. Matthew's, with its Gothic arches and solemn stained-glass saints, should have been a sanctuary. Instead, it became my stage of humiliation. Henry lay in the coffin, polished mahogany gleaming under chandeliers that swung gently with the drafts of opening doors. His photograph, a simple black frame, his kind eyes frozen in a half-smile, rested on the casket. I had stared at that smile every morning for 42 years. That day it felt like an accusation. I wanted to sit quietly to honor him in silence. My black dress brushed against my knees as I walked down the aisle. It was not just fabric but memory stitched into thread. Months of handwork, bead by bead, lace cut with precision, a neckline shaped to whisper elegance rather than scream it. $130,000 in value, yes, but worth more than money. It was my craft, my proof that beauty was not just for the young. But Kayla, my daughter-in-law, saw none of that. She leaned back in her pew with a smirk sharp enough to slice glass. Her friends, glittering in sequin dresses more suited for a nightclub than a funeral, leaned toward her like courtiers waiting for their queen's performance. And then she raised her finger, that manicured spear, and pointed at me. Her voice carried, clear, cutting, deliberate. An old clown with no taste. Gasps cracked the silence. A cough stalled. Someone dropped a rosary. Her friends erupted in laughter, the sound echoing off the stone walls like hyenas baying under cathedral arches. Even the priest at the altar shifted uneasily, his lips pressed into a thin line. I felt eyes burn into me. Neighbors, colleagues, clients who had come to pay their respects to Henry, not to watch me gutted alive. Some looked away, ashamed on my behalf. Others lingered, curious, hungry for scandal to gnaw on when the service ended. Beside her, my son Ben sank lower in his seat. His jaw tightened, his fingers drummed nervously against his thigh. Finally, with the weakness of a man trapped between two loyalties, he mumbled, "Calm down, Kayla." Not firm. Not protective. Not what a son should say when his mother was ridiculed in public. He didn't even glance at me. His eyes stayed fixed on Henry's coffin, as though if he stared hard enough, he could avoid acknowledging what his wife had done. But Lily, my daughter, was different. She rose beside me like a wall of steel wrapped in lace. Her hand slipped into mine, gripping until her knuckles whitened. Her silence was not weakness but defiance. She didn't need words. The fire in her eyes spoke them all. Not today. Not my mother. I stood there, silent. Not because I was powerless. Because silence can be sharper than any retort. Inside, though, I counted. 1 second. 2. 3. Each heartbeat pulsed against my ribs like a drum. And with each pulse, I reminded myself of what Kayla did not know. She didn't know that the dress she mocked had been birthed from my own atelier, the flagship of a fashion house she barely scraped into as a trainee. She didn't know that its cost alone could have bought her entire apartment. She didn't know that I had already prepared her downfall, that her signed termination letter rested in a notary's envelope, sealed and waiting, its ink dry and merciless. She thought herself the future of my family. She didn't realize she was already history. Henry's words rang in my head, a memory sharper than the sting of Kayla's mockery. Margaret, kindness is not weakness. He had repeated that mantra through the decades, when we forgave a supplier late on a payment, when I kept on a seamstress struggling with illness, when I let Ben stumble through failures without reproach. Henry believed in patience, in giving people rope enough to climb. But rope is rope. Can save or it can hang. As Kayla laughed, flipping her golden hair back as if she were at a cocktail party rather than standing before my husband's coffin, I realized something with a calmness that chilled me. Kindness had ended. I stared at her smirk, her painted lips, the glittering earrings I had once bought her as a birthday gift. She wore them that day, probably without remembering where they had come from. That was Kayla's way. Adorn herself with generosity, then sneer at the hand that offered it. Behind her, the whispers began. Did she really say that? At her own father-in-law's funeral? Shameless. The congregation shifted in their seats, some leaning forward for a better look, others avoiding eye contact entirely. The organist pressed a hesitant chord, trying to pull attention back to prayer. It fell flat. The room's air was poisoned. I felt none of the embarrassment Kayla intended. No, the humiliation belonged to her, though she was too blind to see it yet. My shame had burned away long before the last bead was sewn into my gown. What I felt instead was clarity, a cutting surgical clarity. Kayla had drawn her line, so I drew mine. I remembered the nights I had stayed late in the studio, bleeding fingertips raw from hours of embroidery, while Henry brought me tea and kissed my forehead. I remembered teaching apprentices to respect not just the wealthy brides but the shy girls buying their first formal dress, the widows wanting one beautiful thing for themselves. And I remembered Kayla's mocking laugh, her disdain for nobodies, her ambition sharpened into cruelty. It had been forgivable before. Annoying. Immature. Henry always said she would grow out of it. But now? To humiliate me at his funeral, in front of everyone, to spit on my grief with the word clown? That was not immaturity. That was character. And character is destiny. I sat down slowly, Lily still holding my hand. My spine straightened, my breath steadied. The service droned on, psalms, eulogies, prayers. I heard none of it. My mind was already elsewhere. The notary had the letter. Paula in HR was waiting for my call. Maya, my assistant, had already archived Kayla's disciplinary warnings. The pieces were in place. I had no need to argue, no need to raise my voice. I would not descend into Kayla's gutter of cruelty, because the cruelest revenge is not insult. It is exposure. And her exposure was coming. As the priest sprinkled holy water, Kayla leaned against Ben's shoulder, whispering something that made him force a laugh. They thought they had won, she with her public mockery, he with his cowardly silence. But funerals are about endings. Henry's life had ended that week. Kayla's role in mine ended that day. I closed my eyes, whispering a silent goodbye to my husband, and then, without moving my lips, I whispered another word meant only for myself. Enough. The funeral ended, but its echoes clung to me like smoke. I returned to my apartment alone that night, the air inside still smelling faintly of the lavender Henry used to insist on spraying before bed. To the world, I was just a widow coming home to a modest life. Peeling paint on the stairwell, a Toyota Corolla parked in the lot, a rent-controlled apartment with second-hand furniture. That was the mask. I stepped into the dark, clicked the lock shut, and leaned my forehead against the door. Kayla's laughter still buzzed in my ears. Her sneer at my clown dress, her friends' cackles, it replayed like a tape on loop. My chest tightened, not with shame but with the clarity of betrayal. I slipped off the black dress, folded it carefully, and placed it into its protective garment bag. $130,000 of craftsmanship, folded and tucked away like any ordinary garment. If Kayla had recognized it for what it was, she would have choked on her own spite. But ignorance had always been her crown. In the kitchen, I boiled water for tea, though my hands moved on instinct more than need. The steam rose, curling in the dim light, and I thought of Henry again. Kindness is not weakness, he used to say. But Henry was gone. Kindness had ended with him. After my tea, I went to the bookcase. A simple pine structure, scuffed from years of use, lined with worn novels and faded family photos. It looked like any widow's library. But I pressed my thumb against the second shelf, slid it an inch to the left, and listened for the click. The mechanism unlocked with a sound only I knew. The shelf swung forward, revealing the truth. Behind it, the real world opened. Rows of files, safe stacked like soldiers, photographs of boutiques and ateliers across cities, contracts framed in glass. A private office hidden in plain sight. On the desk sat two keys. One to the Bentley, one to the Porsche. They slept quietly in a garage across town, untouched, while I drove my old Toyota. People had to believe I was ordinary. That was how I protected my children from arrogance. Or so I thought. 14 boutiques. 2 ateliers. 3 textile mills. An investment empire spanning hotels, commercial properties, and equities. I was not merely a widow. I was an empress behind curtains. And Kayla had mocked me in front of mourners as if I were nothing. I sat at the desk, the leather chair creaking softly, and opened the first drawer. Inside lay the notary's envelope, Kayla's signed termination letter. Sealed, official, irrevocable. I traced the edge of the paper with my finger. The decision had been made before Henry's coffin was lowered. Her laughter had only confirmed it. But it wasn't just about Kayla. It was about the culture Henry and I had built. respect, dignity, craftsmanship. No apprentice, no manager, no designer had ever been allowed to treat clients with contempt. And Kayla had. She mocked their appearances, rolled her eyes at their questions, treated the atelier like her stage. We tolerated her only because Ben loved her. Because Henry asked me to. No more. I picked up the phone and dialed Paula in Human Resources. She answered on the second ring, her voice steady, professional. Paula, it's Margaret. I need you to begin collecting every file we have on Kayla Brooks. Every complaint, every note, every slip of misconduct. Cross-check the camera footage from the last 6 months. If a client raised a brow, I want it documented. Have it all compiled by Thursday. Yes, Mrs. Coleman. Understood. Next, I called Maya, my assistant of 12 years. She was precise, loyal, and sharp enough to anticipate the storm in my voice. Maya, I said, dig into Kayla's file. Pull her old warnings, the tardiness, the constant phone use during shifts, the way she mocked that client in front of staff. I want every record unearthed. Nothing should stay buried. Already ahead of you, Maya replied softly. I kept copies knowing you might need them one day. I paused. Loyalty like hers was the cornerstone of our empire. Kayla would never understand that. The next drawer in my desk held the accounts. My handwriting filled ledger after ledger. Every boutique, every mill, every dividend reinvested. Numbers Henry never cared to memorize but always trusted me with. He used to say, Margaret, you could run an empire in your sleep. And I did. But I never flaunted it. That modest apartment? A shield. The Toyota? A costume. Because wealth that announces itself becomes a target. And I had wanted my children to grow up unspoiled, to learn value before privilege. I thought of Ben, my son, sitting silent at the funeral while his wife mocked me. Did he know about the fortune beneath his feet? No. He believed I had sold the atelier years ago, that I was a retired seamstress living modestly, and perhaps that lie was my mistake. Perhaps it made him blind enough to accept Kayla's story of a promotion, blind enough to think her cruelty was excusable. The tea had gone cold beside me. I poured it down the sink and stared at the city through my window. Lights flickered across Austin, the hum of traffic rising like distant thunder. Somewhere out there, Kayla was posting selfies, painting herself as a grieving widow's benefactor. I could almost hear her voice. I even offered to lend her a dress. Poor thing. But poor was not a word that had ever belonged to me. I opened my planner, the leather cover worn at the edges, and circled Friday. That would be the day. I scheduled a review meeting at headquarters. Paula would present the file. Maya would stand ready. And when the notary opened the sealed envelope, Kayla's employment would end. Not with argument, not with insult, but with fact. It wasn't revenge. Revenge is born from anger. This was clarity, protection, continuity. Still, my fingers trembled slightly as I placed the pen down. Not from doubt, but from the weight of finality. Henry had believed in kindness until his last breath. I did too once. But I had learned that kindness without boundaries becomes a wee *p*n in the hands of the ungrateful. Kayla thought she had embarrassed me. What she had done was write her own ending. And I would make sure the world read every word. The days after Henry's funeral should have been silent, filled with mourning. But silence was a luxury I was not given. Kayla's voice carried even in absence. By Monday morning, her face was already plastered across social media. A photo of her standing in front of a mirror, lips painted crimson, black dress hugging her figure. The caption read, "Grief is heavy but love gives us strength. Even lent my poor mother-in-law one of my dresses, always here for family." Broken heart folded hands. The comments streamed beneath like a chorus of blind applause. "You're an angel. So classy in tragedy. Ben is lucky to have you." Not one of those sycophants knew the truth. She had sneered at my dress, mocked me like a child jeering at a circus act, in the very house of God. Now she painted herself as a saint, offering kindness to the widow she had tried to humiliate. I did not reply. Silence was still my shield. But I saved every **T. Lies leave digital footprints, and I knew how to preserve them. On Tuesday, Ben called. His voice was careful, almost rehearsed. "Mom," he said. "I just wanted to check in. How are you holding up? I let him stumble through his platitudes before answering. I'm fine, Ben. Grief is quieter than people think. He hesitated, then added with false casualness, You know, Kayla feels terrible about the other day. She's worried you might misunderstand her. Misunderstand? I repeated. She called me an old clown in front of your father's coffin. There was silence, only his breath crackling through the line. Finally he said, She didn't mean it. She was emotional. And Mom, maybe we can help you too. I know finances must be hard now with Dad gone. The words were knives, each syllable slicing the thin veil between us. He truly believed I lived on scraps. That my Toyota, my apartment, my plain furniture were all I owned. He believed Kayla's whispered stories of my tough finances. He never thought to ask why my rent was always on time. Why my clothes, though simple, were crafted with a hand no factory could mimic. He never noticed the quiet strength of numbers hidden behind false walls. I did not correct him. I simply said, I'll manage. After the call, I dialed Carla, the supervisor at our flagship boutique. Her voice was brisk, professional, but tinged with unease. Carla, I asked, has Kayla spoken of a promotion? Carla laughed. A dry, humorless sound. Mrs. Coleman, no one here has heard of such a thing. She's still junior staff, under probation for tardiness. Why? Because Kayla had built a fiction. On her social media she had written, Grateful for my recent promotion. Hard work pays off. Management sees my value. Her followers clapped like seals, unaware her real record included lateness, phone use during shifts, and careless handling of clients. A promotion. A lie. And Ben believed it. Maya, ever thorough, sent me a file that same night. She had traced Kayla and Ben's finances. The numbers told a story more damning than any insult. Rent higher than their income. Credit card debt climbing each month. A salary advance Kayla had begged for 3 months earlier already spent. And most damning, a mortgage application filed just weeks before Henry's death, based on her fabricated promotion. They had counted on her lies to buy a dream house. They had signed their names under false income, inflated salaries, a lifestyle they could not afford. I sat at my desk, ledger open before me, and thought of Henry again. He had built our life slowly, brick by brick, never borrowing more than we could repay. He used to say, Illusions are costly, Margaret, but reality is free. Kayla had chosen illusion, and illusions like glass always crack. On Wednesday she posted again. This time a video. She stood in the boutique, phone tilted at an angle, speaking in a voice dripping with false humility. I know grief changes everything. That's why I offered to lend my mother-in-law one of my pieces. She deserves to look her best, even in tragedy. I just want her to know she's not alone. Her words coiled around me like smoke, poisonous and sweet. She played the savior, the benevolent daughter-in-law, while mocking clients behind their backs and ignoring widows in the showroom. I thought of the elderly woman I had once watched her dismiss, a widow, hair pulled back in a bun, hands trembling as she searched for a dress for her granddaughter's wedding. Kayla had rolled her eyes, whispered to another staffer, Waste of time. She can't afford anything here. That day, I had pretended not to hear. Henry had asked me to be patient, to give her another chance. Patience was gone now. By Thursday, Maya confirmed what I already suspected. Kayla's so-called generosity, the dinners out, the designer handbags, the manicured nails, were not funded by her salary. They were borrowed, scraped together with credit and deceit. She was drowning, but instead of swimming, she built castles in the air. I opened their mortgage application, forwarded anonymously by a clerk with a conscience. It listed Kayla's new salary as nearly double her actual pay, citing a promotion to senior management. A lie written in ink, sworn under oath, filed as fact. The illusion was crumbling. All I had to do was let gravity do its work. That night I stood by my hidden office window, looking down at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Kayla was laughing at another dinner, raising a glass she could not afford, mocking me in whispers while polishing her halo online. But empires are not built on glass. Mine was stone, fabric, and steel. Hers was smoke. And I knew how easily smoke vanishes when the wind changes. I whispered into the night, the city's hum answering like distant applause. Friday. The curtain falls on Friday. Thursday began like any other workday, though I no longer believed in ordinary days. The city woke in its usual rhythm, garbage trucks rattling down alleys, the hum of commuters, the dull ache of a world pretending nothing had changed. But inside me everything had shifted. I poured coffee into a chipped mug, the one Henry used every morning. It still carried the faint scratch of his wedding ring, etched into the ceramic from years of careless handling. I traced the mark with my thumb, a silent ritual. For decades I had been his partner not only in marriage but in business. Together we built a culture of dignity, patience, and precision. Now with him gone I guarded that legacy alone. Kayla thought she was playing a game of appearances, posting photos of herself supporting me, spreading her lies about promotions and generosity. But she didn't realize business is never about appearances. It's about records. Records don't lie. And Thursday proved that. At exactly 11:47 a.m., an anonymous email arrived in my inbox. The subject line read only, "For your eyes." For a moment, I hovered over the message. Anonymous emails can be poison, but instinct told me this one mattered. I clicked. A short note appeared first. "She's been bragging. You should hear it yourself." Beneath was an audio file. My pulse quickened as I plugged in my headphones and pressed play. Kayla's voice spilled through the speakers, clear and arrogant. "She's too dumb to notice. I told the client it was a special discount, but I marked it up 20%. She still thanked me for saving her money. Can you believe it? I could sell rags to these women." Laughter followed, hers shrill and mean, joined by another employee's uneasy chuckle. I paused the recording, my hand tightening around the mouse. I had trained my staff to honor every client, whether they spent $50 or $50,000. Respect was non-negotiable. It was the culture Henry and I built with our blood and hours. And here was Kayla, poisoning it with mockery, cheating the very women who kept the lights on. The note continued. "Recorded yesterday in the stockroom phone. She brags often. Check her login history too." Called Maya. Her voice sharpened when she heard the recording. "Send it to me. I'll cross-check her account access right now." 2 hours later she returned with proof. "Mrs. Coleman, we traced 2 login attempts into Carla's supervisor account. Both failed. Both originated from Kayla's phone." I closed my eyes. The pieces fit together too neatly. Fraud with clients. Attempted breaches into management accounts. Lies about promotions. And her public performance of charity, dripping with false kindness. The air in my office grew colder. "Add it to the notary folder," I said. "Her termination will not rest on one insult at a funeral. It will rest on fact." Still I was cautious. Facts can be twisted. Stories can be spun. Kayla was reckless, yes, but she was also shameless, and shameless people wield tears like we *P****s. If she cried hard enough, Ben might believe her. Some employees might pity her. Lies might root before truth takes shape. That was when the idea came. I needed an outsider. Not Paula in HR. Not Maya. Not Carla. Someone beyond suspicion, someone with no ties. So I hired an independent auditor. His name was Robert Vance, a man Henry had trusted years ago when we expanded into textiles. His reputation was iron. He had no stake in our boutiques, no loyalty to staff or family, only to numbers. When I called, his reply was calm but firm. "Send me everything. Every account, every login, every client receipt tied to her name. If there's rot, I'll find it." I hung up and exhaled slowly. This was no longer a family squabble. It was an investigation. By evening the sun dipped low, turning the city windows into sheets of molten gold. I sat at my desk, the room awash in firelight, and thought of Henry again. He used to say, "Surprise can be sharp, Margaret, but truth is sharper." Truth was cutting its way through Kayla's illusions. I replayed the recording once more. Her voice filled the room, boasting of lies, mocking women whose only crime was trust. I imagined the widow saving for months to buy one beautiful gown, walking into our boutique with trembling hands, and being duped by Kayla's greed. The thought curdled my stomach. This wasn't just about my dignity at the funeral anymore. This was about protecting the heart of the empire Henry and I built. I opened the notary folder. Inside lay the termination letter, signed, sealed, waiting. Now it had companions. Audio recordings, login breach reports, *TS of her fabricated promotion, proof of debts and false mortgage applications. A case so strong no tears could dissolve it. Kayla thought Friday would be another day to parade herself online. She didn't know Friday was her reckoning. I closed the folder, locked it in the safe, and whispered into the quiet. Tomorrow the mask cracks. Friday. The day I had circled in my planner with steady ink. The day Kayla's illusions would fracture. But before papers, before notaries, before HR procedures, I wanted proof in my own hands. Not numbers. Not anonymous recordings. I wanted to feel it with my own eyes and ears. I wanted to step into the boutique I had built, not as its founder, but as a woman who could be dismissed, ignored, mocked. So I dressed myself simply. A plain blouse, soft from years of washing. Dark trousers that could have been bought at any department store. Comfortable flats with scuffed toes. I tied my hair back in a modest knot, left my jewelry in its velvet box, and picked up a handbag I hadn't carried in 20 years. To anyone on the street, I looked like a widow with a tight budget and little more. When I parked the Toyota in front of the flagship boutique, no one looked twice. That was the point. Inside, the boutique smelled of orchids and polished wood. Soft music floated through the air, Debussy, chosen years ago to soothe nerves and make silk shimmer under the right notes. I had chosen every detail of this place. The marble floor, the mirrors that softened imperfections, the gentle lighting that flattered every face. It was meant to be sanctuary. And yet, the first sound I heard was Kayla's laughter. She stood behind the counter, phone in hand, her head tilted at an angle I knew too well. The pose for a filtered selfie. She didn't look up until I approached. When she did, her lips curled into a smile that wasn't a smile at all. "Budget section's over there," she said, her tone coated in false sweetness. She gestured with her manicured nails toward the clearance rack at the far corner. "I'm looking for something special," I said softly. "Maybe a dress. My limit is $500. Her laugh was sharp, too loud for the quiet room. She turned to her phone, muttering just loud enough for me to hear. "Pathetic. My mother-in-law vibes." Her friend on the line giggled. Kayla's eyes slid over me as if I were dust. "500 doesn't get you special, darling. It gets you leftover." I didn't answer. I let her words hang, heavy in the air, recorded not on a device but on my memory. Because humiliation doesn't need technology. It etches itself into skin. Beside me, another woman waited. Older, her posture bent slightly, hands clutching a purse that had clearly seen decades of use. A widow perhaps, or a grandmother. She looked lost among the silk gowns and crystal displays. Kayla ignored her completely. But not everyone did. A young employee, Hannah, stepped forward. She couldn't have been more than 22, still shy in her movements, her uniform crisp with newness. Yet her voice was gentle as she approached the older woman. "May I help you find something, ma'am?" The woman's eyes softened. She whispered about her granddaughter's wedding, about wanting something beautiful though she didn't have much to spend. Hannah listened as though those words carried gold. She guided her slowly through the racks, lifting fabrics, explaining textures, making her feel not like a burden but like a queen. I watched from the clearance corner where Kayla had shoved me, watched as the true heart of the boutique, respect without pretense, lived on in Hannah's quiet service. Meanwhile, Kayla scrolled her phone, chewing gum, rolling her eyes at anyone who dared interrupt. Twice she snapped photos of herself in the mirror, adjusting her hair, puckering her lips. Each time she looked at me and smirked, as though mocking me was part of her performance. "Honestly," she muttered into the phone again, "this place attracts strays. Management should put up a dress code for clients. If you can't afford it, don't touch it." Those words, spoken in the sanctuary I had built for all women, pierced deeper than her funeral insult. Henry and I had vowed our boutiques would never shame anyone, never measure worth by wallets. And here she was, tearing that vow apart with a smirk. I let it continue. Sometimes you have to let cruelty reveal itself fully before you cut it off. Carla, the supervisor, emerged from the back. She spotted me lingering in clearance, then her eyes shifted to Kayla, still on her phone. Her jaw tightened. "Kayla," she said, her voice low but firm, "Mrs. Coleman is here. She wants to meet you upstairs." For a moment Kayla froze. The gum stilled between her teeth. She turned, eyes darting toward me. Confusion first, then dismissal. She thought Carla meant a different Mrs. Coleman, some wealthy client she'd never met. Sure, she said, tossing her hair. Tell her I'll be up in 5. No, Carla replied. She's already here. I stepped forward from the clearance rack, still dressed in my modest blouse and flats. Kayla's smirk faltered. Her eyes widened, then narrowed, panic flickering like lightning behind them. You, she whispered. I met her gaze without raising my voice. Yes, me. For the first time all week the air felt still. The music no longer mattered. The orchids no longer scented the room. Every eye turned, every breath held. Kayla had laughed at me at Henry's funeral. She had mocked me in this boutique. She had insulted clients, faked promotions, lied on mortgage applications. But now her stage collapsed. And the curtain was about to fall. The marble stairs curved upward like a stage entrance. I walked them slowly, each step deliberate, flats scuffing softly against the stone. Behind me I heard Kayla's hurried breathing, her bravado melting into something tighter, more brittle. She followed, one step behind, her phone still clutched in her hand like a shield she didn't know how to use. Maya was waiting at the landing. She stood tall, her presence sharp as a blade in a sheath. She glanced at me, then turned to the staff gathered discreetly near the showroom floor below. Her voice rang out clear and calm. Mrs. Coleman, the managers are waiting upstairs. The sentence was simple, but its weight cracked through the room like thunder. Staff who had known me only as a distant founder, almost mythical in their stories, now realized the truth. The widow in flats, mocked in clearance, was their employer. Their silence was electric, heavy, alive. Hannah's eyes widened, her lips parting in shock. The elderly client she had served clasped her hands together, as if she understood something sacred had been revealed. Kayla froze mid-step. Color drained from her face, leaving only the smear of foundation that suddenly seemed too thick, too false. Her voice faltered. Wait, what do you mean my mother-in-law? She is your boss, Maya said firmly. She owns this company. The words landed like stones dropped in water, ripples spreading through every corner of the boutique. Gasps rose, whispers fluttered, silence fell again. Kayla's mouth opened and closed. For once there was no sneer, no quick insult ready to strike. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, her mask slipping off in real time. I did not gloat. I did not raise my voice. I simply stood there, letting the truth breathe in the open air. Upstairs, I said softly. We moved into the meeting room. Glass walls overlooked the boutique floor, the city skyline beyond. The table was long, polished, and empty except for a single folder placed neatly at its center. Paula from HR stood at the far end, silent, her arms crossed. Kayla hesitated at the door, hovering like a child caught with stolen sweets. She glanced back toward the staircase, as if escape were possible, but Maya guided her forward. Sit, I said. She lowered herself into a chair, her posture stiff, her phone now trembling in her hand. I sat opposite her. For a moment I let silence speak. Silence has weight more than accusations. It makes the guilty squirm until their own conscience betrays them. Finally I spoke. My voice was calm, measured. You judged clients by their appearance. Kayla swallowed hard. That's not. You ignored older women, dismissed them as if their money wasn't worth the same as the young and wealthy. You mocked clients to your colleagues, laughed at them for trusting you. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for rescue. None came. You used your phone during shifts. You rolled your eyes at instructions. You proposed a dress code for clients, deciding who was worthy to enter our doors. And worst of all, I leaned forward slightly, just enough for her to see the steel in my eyes. You humiliated me at my husband's funeral. Her lips trembled. I didn't know. And that, I cut in, is the problem. Your respect only switches on for the rich. You look at a woman in plain clothes and decide she's invisible. But what you never understood is that character is revealed in how you treat those you think cannot help you. Her breathing quickened. Tears welled, catching the light. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were fear of exposure, of consequences, of a mask torn away. I gestured to the dress I had worn at the funeral. It hung carefully on a mannequin in the corner, brought from my atelier for this moment. The dress you called clownish? 130,000. Crafted in my own studio. My work. My name. My legacy. And you spat on it in front of mourners. Kayla shook her head, her voice a whisper. I didn't know. Exactly. You didn't know. Because your eyes are trained only to see money, not people. And when money hides itself, you reveal your truth. The room was still. Even Paula, seasoned from years in HR, watched with quiet gravity. Maya stood near the glass wall, arms folded, her gaze unwavering. Kayla's tears spilled now, sliding down her cheeks, smearing her foundation. Everyone says things sometimes. I was upset, I didn't mean. You meant every word, I replied. Mockery spoken aloud is never an accident. Cruelty doesn't slip, it drips. Her sob cracked. Please, I didn't. Enough. My voice sliced the air. Not raised but final. Your actions, your words, your lies, they're documented. This isn't judgment. This is fact. She bent forward, clutching her phone, as if pressing it to her chest could shield her. But no screen could save her. The mask was gone. I let her sit in her unraveling. Because exposure is not loud. It is quiet. It is the moment when the liar realizes the room no longer believes them. Through the glass I saw the staff below whispering, glancing up. They knew. The truth traveled faster than any announcement. Kayla had laughed at me in clearance, thinking I was no one. Now she sat trembling, stripped of her illusion, facing the reality she had mocked. And the reality was me. I closed the folder in front of me without opening it. Its contents would come next. But for now silence was enough. Silence and the sight of Kayla Brooks with no mask left to wear. The folder sat between us, heavy though its pages were thin. Kayla's breath hitched as I slid it closer, the soft scrape against the table louder than her whimper. Paula from HR opened the cover. She did not rush, did not dramatize. She simply laid each piece of evidence on the polished wood as though placing cards in a game already won. First came the camera recordings. Screensh *TS of Kayla checking her phone while clients waited, rolling her eyes at instructions, smirking while others worked. One frame caught her leaning across the counter, whispering into her phone as a client stood ignored before her. Kayla's hands twitched. That was just once. 17 times, Paula corrected. Documented. Next came the client complaints. Printed emails, written notes, each signed. Words that burned. She made me feel unwelcome. Said the dress wasn't in my price range. Laughed when I asked if alterations were possible. Kayla pressed her palms to her cheeks as if she could block the sound of words printed in black and white. Then Paula laid out the login breach reports. 2 attempts traced to Kayla's phone, both aimed at Carla's supervisor account. Kayla shook her head wildly. I never, someone else. The system logs don't lie, Maya said. Her tone was calm, clinical, unmovable. Finally, Paula placed the most damning piece. A transcribed audio recording. Kayla's voice filled the room once more, bragging about tricking a client with false discounts, mocking her gullibility. Kayla's sob broke sharp. That was private. Someone set me up. No, I said, my voice steady as glass. That was you. Your words. Your pride. Paula slid one last document forward. The notarized dismissal letter, signed before the funeral, sealed until today. The official weight of it was undeniable. This, Paula said, was prepared in advance, awaiting only Mrs. Coleman's confirmation. Kayla collapsed into the chair, shoulders shaking. Please, she whispered. Please, Margaret, I was upset, I needed money. I thought if I looked strong Ben would respect me, please. Her tears fell freely now, streaking down her face. She clutched her phone like a rosary, as if hashtags and sympathy posts could erase the ink before her. I have debts, she choked. We applied for a house. If I lose this job, everything collapses. Please give me a second chance. I'll change. I'll prove myself. I looked at her, and for a fleeting second, I saw the girl she had once been. Wide-eyed, eager, fumbling with fabric scraps in the atelier, desperate to prove she belonged. But that girl was gone, replaced by ambition sharpened into cruelty. This is not revenge, I said quietly. This is policy. Values. Protection. You mocked clients, lied to management, betrayed trust. You did not stumble, you built a pattern. Kayla's tears turned frantic. Please, Margaret, I'll do therapy training, anything. Don't take this away from me. You don't understand. I only wanted. You wanted status, I said. And you tried to climb by stepping on others. But this house was never built on status. It was built on dignity. Silence. Only her sobs filled the room. I took the pen, signed the letter, and placed it back in the folder. The sound of the ink scratching against paper was final, absolute. Kayla Brooks, I said. Your employment is terminated effective immediately. Paula nodded. Security will escort you to your locker. Kayla's head snapped up, panic blazing. In front of them? Please don't make me. I met her gaze steady. Actions have consequences. Staff deserve to see that dignity is not optional here. Respect is non-negotiable. Her breath came in sharp gasps as two security staff entered quietly. They didn't touch her, didn't threaten, just stood beside her chair with silent authority. She rose slowly, her sobs broken into hiccups. Her phone slipped from her grip and clattered to the floor. She bent to pick it up, hands trembling, mascara smudged across her face. Please, she whispered one last time, looking at me as if searching for mercy. But mercy without accountability is cruelty to everyone else. I gave her none. The doors opened. She stepped into the hallway, flanked by security. The staff below glanced up as the group descended the stairs. Whispers rose, but no laughter, only the quiet murmur of understanding. At the bottom, Kayla paused, eyes darting to the exit. Her friends would be waiting online, but their applause could not erase this scene. She walked through the glass doors, head bowed, and was gone. I stood at the railing above, the staff watching me. Their eyes searched not for drama but for direction. They wanted to know if this place still held its soul. So I spoke, my voice calm but carrying across the boutique. Every client deserves equal dignity. Whether she spends 50 or 50,000, she will be treated with the same respect. That is our law. That is our legacy. The room was still. Then slowly Hannah stepped forward. She didn't speak, but her eyes shone with something stronger than words. She had served that elderly widow with grace when Kayla had mocked. She had lived the values Kayla trampled. I nodded to Carla. Promote her. She will lead by example. The staff straightened, the weight of the moment settling into their bones. They knew now. Cruelty is noticed, respect is rewarded. I turned away, leaving the glass doors behind. Kayla was gone, her mask shattered. But what remained was not her ruin. It was the reaffirmation of what Henry and I had built. An empire not of marble or silk but of dignity. Night had already fallen when Ben arrived. The city lights flickered against my apartment windows, fractured into patterns by the old glass. I had not invited him. He came because Kayla had called him in tears, her voice soaked in self-pity, weaving her own ending into a plea. The knock was soft at first, then insistent. I opened the door and found him standing there in his work shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, eyes tired but restless. He looked older than his 36 years, as though grief had aged him and weakness had weathered him further. "Mom," he said, his voice low. "We need to talk." I stepped aside. He entered slowly, his gaze scanning the modest furniture, the faint smell of lavender Henry had loved. He still believed this apartment was my whole world. "Tea?" I asked, already moving to the kettle. "No thanks," he murmured, sinking into a chair. His hands rubbed together nervously, fingers laced tight. We sat in silence for a while. The kettle hissed, the city hummed. Finally he spoke. "Kayla told me everything. About the dismissal. About you humiliating her in front of the staff. She said it was cruel." I looked at him. "Cruel?" He faltered. She's under pressure. She made mistakes, yes, but..." His voice cracked. "Did it have to be so public?" I placed the teacup gently on the table between us, steam rising like a veil. "Ben, the cruelty was not in the dismissal. The cruelty was in the funeral. When she mocked me before your father's coffin and you stayed silent." His shoulders stiffened. He lowered his gaze. I didn't know what to do. "You did nothing," I said sharply. "And silence is a choice." He flinched. The truth lodged deeper than any insult. He leaned forward, head in his hands, muttering, "I'm sorry, Mom. But apologies mean little without understanding. So I stood, walked to the bookcase, and pressed the hidden latch. The mechanism clicked. The shelf swung open. Ben's head lifted. His eyes widened as the hidden office revealed itself. Safes stacked like sentinels, files lined in meticulous rows, photographs of boutiques across cities, contracts framed in glass. The world he never knew. He rose to his feet, stunned. What is this? This, I said, stepping inside, is your inheritance. Your father and I built it together. 14 boutiques, 2 ateliers, 3 mills, investments across industries. The modest life you thought I lived was a mask. I hid the empire so my children would not grow arrogant. He stepped closer, his eyes darting across the ledgers, the safes, the photographs. His voice trembled. All this time, you let me think you were barely making rent. Yes, I said. Because I wanted you to grow into a man who valued effort, not privilege. But instead you believed Kayla's illusions. You believed her stories of promotions, of finances, of superiority. You believed her lies instead of seeing your mother standing humiliated in silence. His face crumpled. Mom, I didn't defend you because I thought maybe you were weak. I thought you didn't mind. I thought Kayla was just easier to believe, I cut in. It was easier to let her lead the show than to confront the truth. Easier to let her sneer at me than to stand up and risk her anger. He sank back into the chair, his breath shallow. Tears welled in his eyes. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you show me this sooner? Because wealth is not meant to buy loyalty, I said. I needed to see who you were without it. And now I know. Silence pressed between us, heavier than the ledgers stacked on the shelves. Finally, I pulled a folder from the safe, the same one Paula had used in the meeting. I placed it in front of him. Inside lay Kayla's file. Complaints, recordings, breach attempts, her own words mocking me at the funeral. Ben flipped through the pages slowly, his face paling with each line. He read the transcript of her laughter in the stockroom, the mortgage application with falsified numbers, the notes of clients humiliated. His hands shook. She told me none of this was true, he whispered. Of course she did, I said coldly. She has never confessed cruelty, only consequences. He closed the folder and pressed his palms against it as though trying to crush the evidence. Tears slid down his cheeks. Why didn't I defend you? He whispered. Why did I let her? Because it was easier to believe the show, I answered. Because illusion was softer than reality. Because standing up would have meant standing against her. And you weren't ready. He covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking. For a moment I saw not a man but the boy I once raised, soft, uncertain, searching for approval. Mom, he choked. What do I do now? I leaned forward, my voice steady as iron. You ask yourself one question. What kind of man do you want to be, when the cost is not likes, not convenience, not comfort, but conscience? His hands dropped. His eyes, red and wet, met mine. There was no answer yet. Only silence. But sometimes silence is not emptiness. It is a beginning. I stood, closing the safe, swinging the bookcase shut once more. The apartment returned to modesty, as if nothing extraordinary lay behind its walls. Think carefully, Ben, I said softly. Because the empire is not just inheritance. It is responsibility. And responsibility weighs heavier than wealth. He nodded weakly, clutching the folder as though it were both anchor and chain. That night after he left, I stood by the window, the city lights blinking like scattered stars. For the first time in years I felt not grief but clarity. Henry was gone. Kayla was finished. And my son stood at the crossroads of manhood, forced to choose not between wealth and poverty, but between conscience and cowardice. The choice would not be mine to make. It never was. When Ben left, silence settled like dust. I thought the night would end there. But just past 10 the phone rang again. Lily's voice crackled on the line, urgent, sharper than usual. Mom, Ben came by my place. He looked like he'd been gutted. He said you showed him something. What's going on? There was no evasion left. Come tomorrow, I told her. I'll show you myself. She arrived at noon dressed in her teacher's clothes. Cardigan, skirt, practical shoes scuffed from chalk-dusted hallways. Her hair was tied back hastily, and her eyes held the familiar intensity of someone used to shepherding unruly classrooms. She stepped into my apartment and frowned. Ben says you've been hiding things. Big things. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I walked to the bookcase, pressed the hidden latch, and let the mechanism click. The shelf swung open. Lily's breath caught. "What is this?" she whispered, stepping forward. The hidden office revealed itself in full. The safes, the ledgers, the photographs of boutiques and mills, the contracts under glass. My life's work, hidden behind pine and dust. Her hand brushed over the edge of a ledger. "You mean to tell me all these years this was here? You let us believe you were living paycheck to paycheck while you were an empire." Her voice cracked between disbelief and accusation. "Yes," I said simply. Her face hardened. "Why? Why hide this from me? From us? Do you know how many nights I worried about you? How many times I thought you were eating canned soup while giving Ben money he never deserved? How many times I—" Her words tumbled over each other, anger rising like a storm. I let her speak. Sometimes love hides itself as anger, because the wound of betrayal is sharper when it comes from secrecy. Finally, she sank into a chair, pressing her hand to her forehead. "You made me feel like a fool, Mom. Like I didn't know you at all." I sat opposite her. "I didn't want my children growing up spoiled. I wanted you to see value in people, not in money. That's why we lived modestly." She lifted her head, eyes blazing. "But you didn't trust us with the truth." "No," I admitted. "I didn't. Because truth in the wrong hands becomes P*N. Ben proved me right. He let Kayla's lies blind him. He thought my silence was weakness. I couldn't risk it." Her shoulders slumped. She looked down, tracing the grain of the table. "I teach kids from poor families every day. I know what real need looks like. And all this time my own mother was hiding millions. Do you understand how that feels?" "I do," I said softly. "And I also know you never once mocked those children. You treated them with respect. That is why I'm showing you this now. Because wealth must never be used to humiliate. Not by Kayla. Not by anyone." The silence stretched, heavy but shifting. Slowly, her anger gave way to something else. Understanding, reluctant but growing. "All right," she said finally. "I get it. You raised us modest so we'd know dignity. Fine. But what now? Because Ben's a wreck, Kayla's a storm, and I don't see this ending with a neat bow." Before I could answer, Maya called. Her voice was clipped. "Mrs. Coleman, you need to know, Kayla is at headquarters right now. She's demanding to see you. She says she's been treated unjustly. She's causing a scene." I closed my eyes briefly. Of course she was. Kayla never accepted consequence without spinning it into victimhood. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said. Lily straightened. "I'm coming too." Her tone brooked no argument. The drive was silent except for the hum of the Toyota's tired engine. Lily's hands were folded tightly in her lap, her jaw set. When we arrived at headquarters, the receptionist's eyes widened at the sight of us. She whispered, "She's in your office, refusing to leave." We entered together. Kayla sat in the chair opposite my desk, her face blotched from tears, mascara smudged into shadows. She jumped up when she saw us, her voice high, desperate. "Margaret! Finally! You have to listen. They've twisted everything. I admit. I was late sometimes, I used my phone too much, I even joked when I shouldn't have, but termination? In front of everyone? That's not justice. That's cruelty." Her words tumbled out in frantic waves, but she avoided the one thing she had done at the funeral. Not a word about mocking me in black before Henry's coffin. That humiliation she erased from her version. Lily stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Justice? You think calling my mother a clown at my father's funeral was justice? You think mocking widows in the boutique was justice?" Kayla turned to her, eyes wide. "Lily, please, you're different. You know me. Sometimes I say things." "No," Lily snapped. "You don't just say things. You reveal yourself. And now you're afraid the mirror won't lie back to you." Kayla's sobs cracked again. She collapsed into the chair, clutching her bag like a lifeline. I was scared. I wanted to be someone. I wanted to have more than scraps. "I didn't mean to." "You didn't mean to be cruel?" I asked quietly. Remorse over consequences is not the same as remorse for cruelty. And you still haven't said the words that matter. I'm sorry for humiliating you in front of Henry's coffin. She stared at me, mouth trembling, but no words came. The silence was answer enough. Lily crossed her arms, her face hard. Then there's nothing more to say. Kayla buried her face in her hands. Her sobs filled the office, but they no longer touched me. For years I had mistaken tears for sincerity. Now I knew better. Leave the office, I told her. Your employment is over. Your excuses end here. She rose slowly, staggering toward the door. For a moment I thought she might turn back with one last plea. Instead, she left without a word, her heels clicking against the marble like the last echoes of a hollow performance. The door closed. Lily turned to me, her voice softer now. I understand, Mom. I do. But this isn't just business. This is family. And family cuts deeper. I nodded. Yes. And family wounds do not heal with lies. They only heal with truth. We stood there in silence, the river visible through the glass beyond the office. Its waters flowed steady, indifferent to human drama. For the first time, Lily and I stood shoulder to shoulder, not just mother and daughter but allies. Kayla's show was over. And the next act would not be written by her tears. Kayla's dismissal should have been the end. Papers signed, security escort completed, the door closed. Yet endings rarely arrive clean. They drag, clawing at the edges, desperate to rewrite themselves. It was late Saturday when the call came. Maya's voice was clipped. She's back at headquarters. She's demanding to see you again. She says she deserves one more chance. I considered refusing. But something in Maya's tone told me this was more than theatrics. So I agreed. By evening, Lily and I walked into the office together, the Colorado River stretching like a blade of silver beyond the glass walls. Kayla stood near the desk, her eyes red-rimmed, her face pale. She had shed her arrogance like a snake's skin, but what remained was not humility, it was desperation. Margaret, she began, her voice raw. I'm begging you. Please don't end it like this. I know I've been late, I know I use my phone, I know I mock people. I admit it. But termination? Please. Give me training, probation, therapy, anything. I'll do better. Promise. She looked to Lily, hoping for an ally. But Lily's arms were crossed, her face stone. I didn't move from where I stood. The job is gone. That decision is final. Kayla's breath caught. Her knees buckled slightly, and she gripped the edge of the desk for balance. Then give me something. Anything. A chance to prove I'm not worthless. Her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of truth half recognized. I studied her carefully. She had admitted to tardiness, phone use, even mockery, but always wrapped in excuses. Always as if her sins were small, forgivable, the common errors of youth. But the true cruelty, the humiliation at Henry's funeral, remained absent from her mouth. So I spoke. There is one path left to you. Not to reclaim this job. That is closed. But to reclaim dignity. Tell Ben the whole truth. Admit to him what you did. Every word. Every lie. The funeral, the fake promotion, the debts, the mockery. Kayla's eyes widened in panic. Ben? No. I can't. He'd never forgive me. Exactly, I said. Because true remorse isn't about avoiding punishment. It's about facing it. You say you want dignity? Then stop lying. Stop spinning excuses. Tell him who you are when no one is looking. She shook her head violently, tears spilling again. I can't. If I tell him everything, I'll lose him. You've already lost him, Lily said coldly. You just haven't faced it yet. I opened a separate folder from my desk and slid it across to her. Inside were notes from family gatherings, written by Maya at my instruction. Reports of Kayla mocking me in whispers, calling me a charity case, laughing about my Toyota. Words she thought were private, recorded now in neat black ink. Kayla's hand flew to her mouth. Someone wrote all that down? Yes, I said. Because character is shown in private. And you failed every test. The only thing left is honesty. Not to me. To Ben. Her sobs broke into hiccups, her voice cracking like thin glass. Please, Margaret, please don't make me do that. I'll say anything else, I'll do anything else. No, I said, my voice sharp enough to cut. This is not a bargain. This is the last honest path you have left. If you take it, you may lose everything, but at least you'll stand in truth. If you don't, you'll lose everything anyway, but you'll remain in lies. Silence swallowed the room. The river glimmered beyond the glass, indifferent. Kayla slumped into the chair, her tears staining the folder. For a long time she said nothing, her breath shallow, her body shaking. Finally she whispered, I can't tell him. And in that moment, the last possibility of redemption slipped from her grasp. I stood, my voice calm but final. Then there is nothing left to discuss. Dignity is not given. It is chosen. And you chose lies. Lily opened the door. The sound of its hinge echoed like a gavel. Kayla rose unsteadily, clutching her bag, her eyes hollow. She moved toward the exit slowly, each step dragging as though the air itself weighed her down. At the threshold she turned. For the briefest second I thought she might speak, might finally say the words she had refused all along. But silence clung to her lips. She left. The office quieted. Only the hum of the city outside remained. Lily walked to the window, her reflection merging with mine in the glass. She'll never change, she said softly. No, I agreed. But we will. We will never mistake cruelty for strength again. The folder lay open on the desk, Kayla's private words stark on the page. I closed it carefully, placed it back in the drawer and locked it. Not out of secrecy but out of finality. Because sometimes the last honest path is not taken. Sometimes it is simply left behind, like a road abandoned, overgrown, swallowed by weeds. And Kayla had chosen her weeds. The call came late on a Sunday night. The air outside my window was still, heavy with Texas heat, cicadas droning like restless thoughts. My phone buzzed once, twice before I picked it up. Ben's voice was quiet, stripped of pretense. Mom, he said, I'm filing for divorce. For a long moment I said nothing. I listened to the rawness in his tone. The sound of a man stepping out of denial and into reality. It hurts, he continued. But for the first time in years I feel like I can breathe. His words carried no triumph, only exhaustion. Freedom is never easy when it comes wrapped in grief. When we met a few days later, his eyes looked clearer. Tired, yes, but no longer clouded by illusion. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, his hands resting on a folder filled with legal documents. I should have defended you that day, he said, his gaze steady at last. At the funeral, at the boutique, everywhere. I let her voice drown out yours, and I can't forgive myself for it. You don't need my forgiveness, I said. You need your own. His shoulders sagged, but he nodded. Then came the harder conversation, the one I had avoided for years. I gathered both Ben and Lily in the hidden office. This time the bookcase door stayed open. No more secrets. You need to understand what comes next, I began. Your father and I built this empire not for comfort, but for responsibility. Wealth, if mishandled, becomes poison. I will not leave poison as my legacy. Ben's eyes flickered to the ledgers, the safes, the photographs. Lily's jaw was set, her hands folded calmly. This is what I've decided, I continued. Ben, you will manage the retail side. But not from a chair. You will start on the floor. 5 years. You will work every role: sales, inventory, supervision. You will learn dignity through service. If you succeed, then and only then will you move into management. His mouth opened as if to protest, but he stopped himself. He nodded slowly. If that's what it takes, then yes. I'll do it. Lily, I said, turning to her. You will inherit the properties and the investments. But with a mandate. Fund scholarships for underprivileged children. You've given your life to education. Now you'll have the means to change futures. Her eyes softened, though a faint smile touched her lips. That? I can do. These conditions are not negotiable, I said firmly. Because wealth must never be used to humiliate. Not in this family. Not ever. Silence filled the office, the weight of finality pressing on all of us. For years I had hidden everything to protect them from arrogance. Now the truth sat between us, heavier than gold. Weeks passed. The divorce papers were filed. Kayla's name faded from our conversations, replaced by the slow work of rebuilding. Ben began his new role quietly, without announcement. I visited the flagship boutique one afternoon and found him behind the counter, wearing the same uniform as every other sales associate. His tie was crooked, his posture stiff, but his eyes were focused. I lingered by a display, watching unseen as a modest widow entered. She looked lost, her hands trembling slightly as she touched the fabric of a scarf. Ben approached her gently. His voice was soft, unhurried. He listened as she explained she wanted something small, something affordable, for her daughter's birthday. She apologized 3 times for wasting his time. He shook his head. "You're not wasting anyone's time. Let me help you find something perfect." He guided her through the display, lifting scarves, explaining textures, showing her colors. When she chose one, a simple piece not expensive, he wrapped it carefully as though it were the crown jewels. He handed it to her with both hands and a smile that, for once, held no performance. The widow left glowing, clutching the bag as though it carried more than fabric. I stepped forward. Ben startled when he saw me. "Mom," he said awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck. "She only bought a scarf. Nothing big." "Respect isn't measured by totals," I said. "It's measured by how she leaves." And she left glowing. His eyes lowered, a faint flush coloring his cheeks. "I think I finally understand." For the first time in years I believed him. Lily, meanwhile, had already drafted the foundation plan for the scholarships. She spent nights poring over applications, designing criteria to ensure the children who most needed opportunities would receive them. "Education," she told me, "is the only inheritance that multiplies." Watching them both, I felt Henry's absence keenly. He would have smiled at Lily's resolve, placed a proud hand on Ben's shoulder. He always said, "Our wealth isn't in what we own, but in what we teach." Now finally the teaching had big asterisk N. The road ahead was long. Ben would stumble. Lily would wrestle with bureaucracy, and I would continue to guard the legacy Henry and I built. But for the first time since his coffin closed, I felt something more than grief. I felt the faint hum of continuity, fragile but alive. Not because Kayla had been cast out, but because the children she tried to blind had beg asterisk N at last to see. Months passed. Autumn bled into winter, and with it came quiet changes. The boutiques carried on as they always had. Silk draped on mannequins, mirrors softening imperfections, music filling the air. But beneath the surface, something fundamental had shifted. The staff had seen Kayla escorted out. They had heard the words spoken from the railing. "Every client deserves equal dignity." It wasn't just a statement, it was a vow carved into the walls. From that day forward it lived not as policy but as culture. Carla, ever the steady supervisor, reshaped hiring. Questions no longer centered on resumes alone. Candidates were asked how they would treat a nervous widow, a shy teenager, a woman buying on a budget. If respect faltered even in answers, the interview ended. And Hannah, the quiet young associate who had once guided an older client with grace while Kayla laughed, was promoted. Not to management, not yet, but to something more important, leadership of workshops across the boutiques. They were called Respect and Service. She stood before rooms of staff, her voice still soft but her conviction unshakable. "I didn't learn this from a book," she told them. "I learned it by watching. When people think no one sees, that's when their truth comes out. We owe every client dignity. That's not a slogan, it's who we are." Her words traveled farther than any marketing campaign. Clients noticed. Reviews spoke not only of gowns but of kindness, of staff who listened, who never judged. Sales rose, yes, but more importantly, the soul of the company was renewed. I watched all of it from my hidden office, no longer quite so hidden. Ben, in his sales uniform, logged inventory late into the evenings. He stumbled at times, frustrated when clients asked endless questions, humbled when they walked out without buying. But he learned. Slowly, painfully, he learned. One evening he came home, his tie crooked, his hands ink-stained from tags. "Mom," he said, "a widow came in today. She wanted something for her granddaughter's school concert. She kept apologizing, saying she didn't want to waste my time. I remembered what you said, so I told her there was no such thing. She bought only a scarf. But she hugged me before she left." He looked down, his voice breaking. I think I finally saw Dad in that moment. What he meant about kindness not being weakness. I said nothing. I only placed my hand on his shoulder, and for once the silence between us was not heavy, it was whole. Lily's foundation grew roots quickly. Scholarships were announced quietly, without fanfare. Children from families who could not dream of tuition suddenly found doors opening. Lily worked tirelessly, refusing to let wealth sit idle when it could carve futures. "Mom," she told me one night, "I used to think inheritance meant money. Now I see it's duty. I'll carry it." Henry would have been proud. And then one day the phone rang. A voice I did not expect. "Margaret," Kayla said. Her tone was different, lower, stripped of performance. "I wanted to thank you." The words nearly startled me. "For what?" "For forcing me to see myself," she said softly. "I'm working at a department store now. Lower pay, harder hours. For the first time, I know what it feels like to be judged. Clients dismiss me the way I once dismissed others. It stings. But it taught me something. You weren't cruel, you were right." Silence stretched across the line. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she added quickly. "I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know I finally understand." I closed my eyes. For the first time, her voice carried no manipulation, no attempt to twist truth. Only recognition. Perhaps too late, but real nonetheless. "Goodbye, Kayla," I said. That night I stood on the balcony of my office, the Colorado River glinting under the setting sun. The water flowed steady, indifferent, eternal. I whispered into the twilight, to the memory of Henry. We protected kindness without weakness. The wind carried no reply, but I felt him there nonetheless, in the steady hum of the city, in the quiet strength of what we had built, in the resilience of children who finally understood. The story of Kayla's downfall became part of our training, not told with venom but with clarity, not about expensive buttons or grand funerals, but about the cost of choices, about how character reveals itself not when eyes are watching, but when one thinks no one notices. And the notary's sealed envelope? It rested once more in my safe, its purpose fulfilled. It had not been vengeance, it had been insurance. The quiet assurance that cruelty would never reign where Henry and I had sown dignity. The boutiques thrived. The mills hummed. The scholarships grew. My children stood taller, humbled yet stronger. As for me, I carried both scars and freedom. Scars from betrayal, from silence at a coffin, from years of patience mistaken for weakness. Freedom from the weight of illusion, from the burden of secrecy. Betrayal had nearly broken us. But justice, shaped with precision, had become education. An education that was the true inheritance.